check this out later on YouTube. If you want to access my YouTube page, you can go through my Instagram, which is accessible through Clubhouse. So go ahead and find a chair or a place to sit. If you don't have a chair, you can sit somewhere around. So you might be sitting, perhaps lengthening your spine. So you're welcome to lengthen your spine towards the sky and perhaps noticing your breath. You might notice movement as you breathe, perhaps noticing movement in your belly or chest. You might notice it somewhere else, or maybe not at all. If you'd like, you might tilt your head to one side. So you might tilt your head to one side, so maybe your ear moves in the direction of your shoulder. So you could be tilting your head to one side, maybe noticing the breath. And if your head is tilted to one side, you're welcome to bring it back to center and maybe switching sides. So you might tilt your head the other way, maybe tilting your head to one side. Perhaps noticing sensation is in your neck as you do this. And if you're tilting your head to one side, you might bring it back to center and perhaps rolling your head. So you might roll your head maybe in a circle from side to side or maybe in a full circle. So you have a choice. You could be rolling it side to side or in a full circle. And if you're moving your head, you might bring it back to center and perhaps moving your shoulders. So one way to move your shoulders might be to roll them forward. Another way could be to roll them back. You have a choice. If you've been moving your shoulders, you might bring them back to center and perhaps reaching one arm up towards the sky. So you might reach one arm overhead and you could stay here. Another option might be to lean to one side. So you might be leaning to the side, maybe placing your bottom arm on your leg or on the chair. And maybe noticing your breath. And if you're leaning to one side, you might come back up to center, perhaps releasing your arm if it was lifted. And you're welcome to switch sides, so maybe reaching your other arm up towards the sky. So you might have one arm lifted overhead, and you're welcome to stay here. Another option could be to lean to the other side. So you might be leaning to one side, maybe placing your bottom hand on your leg or chair. You have a choice. Maybe noticing your breath. And perhaps lifting back up to center. You might turn your torso to the right. So you're welcome to turn your torso to the right, maybe placing your left hand on your right leg. So you might be turning your torso to the right, maybe turning part of the way, or you can turn as far as you can. You have a choice. Maybe noticing the breath. And perhaps releasing, you're welcome to turn back to center and maybe switching sides. So you might turn towards the left. So you might be turning towards the left, maybe placing your right hand on the outer edge of your left leg. And if you're turning to the left, you might notice some sensation across your upper back or the back of your shoulders. You might notice it somewhere else. And perhaps Releasing. So if you return to the side, you're welcome to come back to center and maybe extending one leg out in front of you on the floor. So you might place one heel on the floor with your leg extended out in front of you. And you might stay lifted. So you could stay here, lifting your spine to the sky. Another option could be to fold forward, perhaps placing your forearms on your thighs, or maybe placing your hands on the floor. You have a choice. And what about the breath? Maybe noticing movement as you breathe. I just noticed I was holding my breath. So if you notice that, you're welcome to invite the breath back in. Then if you're folded forward, you're welcome to lift back up. And if your leg is extended, perhaps bringing it back in and maybe switching sides. So you could extend your other leg out long on the floor, perhaps placing your heel down. And you might stay here, perhaps lifting your spine to the sky. Another option could be to fold forward, maybe placing your hands or forearms on your legs, or you could place your hands on the floor. You have a choice. Maybe noticing the breath. You might notice movement in your chest as you breathe. Or maybe you might notice it somewhere else. And if you're folded forward, you might lift back up to center, perhaps bringing your leg back in if it was extended. And you're welcome to cross one leg over the other. So you might cross one ankle over the other thigh, perhaps opening that knee to the side. So you might be in this figure 4 shape. And you might stay here, perhaps lengthening your spine to the sky. Another option could be to hinge at your hips, maybe folding forward over your leg, perhaps placing your hands on your leg or forearms. You have a choice. If you're folded forward, you might lift back up, and if your leg is crossed over, you're welcome to release it, perhaps switching sides. So you might cross your other leg over. So maybe one ankle is over your thigh. You might open your knee to the side. You might open your top knee to the side, and perhaps staying here. Another option could be to fold over your leg, maybe placing your forearms or hands on your leg, on your top leg. You have a choice. You're welcome to notice your breath. You might notice the pacing of your breath. Like, are your inhales and exhales similar in length, or are they different? And if your leg is crossed over, you might release it. And perhaps extending one leg out in front of you, maybe lifting your leg. So you might lift your leg so your foot is off the floor. And your foot could be off the floor like an inch or two. You could have it a foot or two. It's your choice. So you have a choice. And if you've lifted your leg off the floor, you might notice some sensation in the top of your leg. You might notice it somewhere else. Or maybe not at all. If your leg is lifted, you might release. Perhaps switching sides. So you might extend your other leg up, maybe lifting it a couple inches off the floor, maybe a foot or two. You have a choice. You're welcome to notice your breath. And perhaps if your leg is lifted, you might lower it to the ground. And maybe lengthening your spine to the sky, you might lean back slightly. So you might lean back, perhaps keeping your shoulders off of the chair. So you might keep your shoulders and back off of the chair, maybe lifted, but you might have leaned back. Maybe noticing some sensation in your abdominals. You might notice it somewhere else. Or maybe not at all. And if you're leaning back, you might lift back up to center. And maybe as you're inhaling, you might reach your arms up to the sky. Perhaps on an exhale, you might fold forward, maybe placing your hands on your thighs or on the floor. You have a choice. Maybe on an inhale, you might lift up halfway. So one option might be to place your hands to the front of your shins. Another option could be to place your forearms on your thighs if they're not already there. And then maybe as you're exhaling, you might fold forward. Perhaps on an inhale, you might reach your arms up overhead, maybe lengthening your spine to the sky. And maybe as you're exhaling, you might bring your hands through heart center down by your sides. And you're welcome to do that again. So maybe inhaling, you might lift your arms up overhead. Perhaps as you exhale, you might fold forward, perhaps bringing your hands to your legs or the floor. Maybe as you inhale, you might lift your spine up halfway. And maybe as you exhale, you might fold. Perhaps on an inhale, you might reach your arms overhead. And maybe as you exhale, you might bring your hands through heart center by your sides. And perhaps placing your hands on your legs. As you inhale, you might move your belly forward, maybe lifting your chest up and perhaps dropping your head back. And maybe on an exhale, you might round your spine, perhaps lowering your chin to your chest. Maybe as you inhale, you might drop your belly forward, perhaps lifting your chest and head. And perhaps as you exhale, you might round your spine, maybe lowering your head. You're welcome to do that a few more times on your own with your own breath. Maybe noticing the breath. You might decide to stay in one of those shapes, or you might continue to move between them. Maybe noticing the breath. And perhaps the next time you inhale, you might lengthen your spine up to the sky. And if you'd like, you might find rest. So you might lengthen your spine to the sky, perhaps placing your hands on your lap. Another option could be to lean back in your chair. You could, if you're on the floor, you could lie down. So you have a choice. You're welcome to rest. Maybe noticing the breath. You could place your hands on your belly if you'd like, maybe noticing movement as you breathe. If you notice that you're holding your breath, one option might be to invite your breath back in. And I continue to rest. I'll quiet my voice for about 30 seconds as we rest. And perhaps making movements with your fingers and toes. You might notice your breath. Maybe making your way back to seated. Thank you for letting me guide your practice today. Peace. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Awesome. It was great to see you.